have the right to remain ignorant, but everything you do say can and will be fact-checked. Davinsky memes.
Yo, what's up Instagram? So the meme that we are going to kill today, the meme that needs to die, is the meme that there's such thing as biological races. Here's the first citation to the publication that I'm going to show you by Mr. James B. McKee, who was a sociology professor from Illinois. So there is this misconstrued meme that it's PC culture that has brought on this idea of race being a social construct. This is not true. This is not a modern phenomenon. For hundreds of years, famous anthropologists have disputed the notion of biological races. So Blumenbach was a famous anthropologist from the 1700s to the 1800s. He is quoted as saying, "No variety of mankind exists, whether of color, continence, or stature, so singular as not to be connected with others of the same kind by such an imperceptible transition." So imperceptible transition to me means that there is no clear racial boundary. Where you want to draw racial lines, categorizations, is completely arbitrary. And Joseph Denneker, 100 years later, seems to go along with this train of thought. Before I continue on to Denneker, this is on page 149 of that earlier citation. So in 1900, Joseph Denneker published a book, The Race is a Man, where he objected to the concept of race on the grounds that problems arise in applying zoological nomenclature, which is basically the breaking down of species into subspecies into smaller groups, yada yada. Instead of race, Denneker argued that ethnic groups was a better terminology for anthropology, as ethnic groups formed a virtue of community of language, religion, social institutions, etc., which have a power of uniting human beings. So we have Blumenbach arguing about the arbitrary nature of race from the 1700s to the 1800s. Then we have Denneker arguing about the arbitrary nature of race from the 1800s to the 1900s. And then in the mid-1900s, we have Julian Huxley and A.C. Hayden, who published We Europeans, a survey of racial problems. Here is a pivotal quote from that publication. "The existence of a human subspecies is purely hypothetical. Nowhere does a human group now exist which corresponds closely to a systematic subspecies in animals, since various subspecies have crossed repeatedly and constantly. For existing populations, the non-committal term ethnic group should be used. All that exists today is a number of arbitrary ethnic groups integrating into each other." So this is definitely in line with Denneker's train of thought almost 100 years earlier and Blumenbach's train of thought almost 200 years earlier. So this concept of race being largely a social construct is definitely not a millennial PC move. This has been propagated for hundreds of years in anthropology. So we can bust our first myth here, the myth that race and ethnicity are two different things. No, they are not. They are interchangeable, and this is backed up by hundreds of years of anthropological research. It's also substantiated by the UN Human Rights Charter and British law, as there is no distinction between race, ancestry, nationality, etc. Hit that Uzi. So how do modern-day anthropologists feel about the conception of race, ancestry, and genetics? Well, the American Anthropology Association conducted a survey of over 3,200 anthropologists from a diverse subset of anthropology to find out exactly how they feel on various statements such as these. 86% of anthropologists either strongly disagreed or disagreed with the statement, "The human population may be subdivided into biological races." 88% disagreed with the statement, "Racial categories are determined by biology." 93% disagreed with the statement, "There are discrete biological boundaries among races." 89% of anthropologists agree with the statement, "Biological variability exists, but this variability does not conform to the discrete packages labeled races." 69% of anthropologists agree that boundaries between what have been called races are completely arbitrary, depending mainly upon the wishes of the classifier. I'll read you a couple more, and then if you like you can read the rest over yourself. It's quite interesting what the consensus is among anthropologists these days, because there's so much pseudoscience out there on the internet, but it's nice to get a consensus somewhere, you know. So number 8 I'm going to discuss later. So 73% of anthropologists disagree that race as defined by the US Census is a useful proxy for ancestry. I think I'll end the survey here because we got the core questions out of the way about how anthropologists feel about the term race. So we'll go on to the next topic. But first, to conclude the survey, Our data indicates there has been a dramatic rejection of race concepts among professional anthropologists regardless of subfield. So this is Professor Dunsworth. She is an anthropology professor at Rhode Island University, and she destroyed the meme that humans are comparable to breeds of dog. This is a racist analogy that her students, and a geneticist from the university disproved in 10,000 words. If you would like to read the full article, then you can read it here, 10,000 words. Now let's go back to this question, but 73% of anthropologists disagreed with, that race, as used by the US Census, is a useful proxy. No, it is not. Even the US Census doesn't stand by their definitions of race. The racial categories included in the census questionnaire generally reflect a social definition of race and not an attempt to define race biologically, anthropologically, or genetically. So why not just remove that ambiguity and call it ancestral grouping, ethnic grouping? Why not go in line with what anthropologists have been pushing for hundreds of years? When the American Association of Physical Anthropology conducts their own survey, they say ethnicity, ancestry, and then in commas, as if it's not even real, race. So we have the categories of white and then European American. Why can't the census get in line with what the Association of Anthropologists in America is pushing? I mean, in my opinion, European American is a far better term than white. White is such a convoluted term now. It includes North Africans, it includes Middle Easterners. It doesn't give you a clear picture of your geographical population, your ancestral groupings anyway. So you may as well be more precise and give it at least an ancestral term. Ethnic groupings, let's go back to Denica days. I'm out.
That had built